Okay, so it's my pleasure to introduce you to Professor Maurice Mulvena. He's Professor of Computer Science at Ulster University. And as you have learned from his previous interventions, he's an expert in digital well-being, artificial intelligence, and the use of technology to foster mental health. He's involved in several research projects related to these and other topics. And so he will today be giving an overview of mental health apps and how to cover the needs of the users through technology. Thank you so much, Maurice, for being here. And please, you can.
Okay, thank you, Zarita, and thanks very much for the invite to the summer school late in the year, but I appreciate your perseverance in making sure it happens, and it's a wonderful event. I'd like to start off by thanking in particular Courtney Potts and Edel and Raymond for their contributions to many of the slides here. And to everyone involved from the ChatPal project, most of the other names there from the different partners. This was originally planned to be looking at looking at a number of the mental health chatbots that were in the market, but I quickly realized that there was something possibly more important going on than that merited a different kind of approach. Where I live in Northern Ireland is quite close to where a famous Nobel laureate, Seamus Heaney, lives, who's like me from the countryside. And some of you may be familiar with a book called The Rattle Bag, which is a poetry anthology. It's one of the best anthologies of English language poems, mostly from the 20th century. The rattle bag is just a name for a kind of bag of things that maybe together might make some sense. So this is a rattle bag of things relating to mental health chatbots that hopefully resonates. So I wanted to get away from the systematic approach here and maybe discuss things more broadly, and hope you bear with me in the next 45 minutes. The first thing I'm going to look at is based upon two events in ChatPal, or two aspects of the design workshop, and the other was the national workshops and needs analysis for mental health chatbots. So I'm going to pull that together for you. And then the second thing I'm going to use is a paper, and that's the title of it there. And I'll say more about that in a moment. So it's another item from the rattle bag. And then what I originally started doing was looking at mental health apps and then examples of them. And this is when I realized there was something else going on. And apologies for the brackets. It looks like a Lisp program for those of you who are as old as myself or Mike McTeer. I thought some mental health apps were not really mental health apps. Some of them were health apps. Some of them weren't, really any kind of mental health apps at all. They were just apps. And I'll explain more as I go on what I mean by that as I walk through some examples of things you might not consider to be chatbots at all. And then the last paper I want to look at is Kai paper, What Makes a Good Conversation, Challenges in Designing Truly Conversational Agents. And I think one of the co-authors there is on the summer school. So quite like that paper. It's got many quotes in it, and I'll be mining those quotes to hopefully make a point in my summary. So that's the outline that I want to work through in the next 35 minutes, 40 minutes. So starting off on firm ground, we had a design workshop after we brought out the first version of the ChatPal app, which was a positive psychology model built on the PERMA positive psychology well-being model. so we had a workshop and we said, well, what is it that we want to do? What are the functions? What are the aspects that we want? And Raymond discovered this wonderful tool called Padlet, and we used it, and it quickly co-created or ideated concepts and aspects and functions of a mental health chat bot. We then looked at those and worked out, well, what is it that's coming out that's important, and there were a mix of computing scientists, psychologists, mental health care professionals, and so on participating in this stage of it. Apologies for the lack of legibility of some of this here, but the key thing really is that we did a thematic analysis on and came up with several different clear emerging themes. Design. I'll just simplify it here. Logging. So logging of behaviors for self-care, self-management. See for diary, the idea of the gratitude diary. Bringing in physical well-being and monitoring that. The idea of supporting positivity, for sure. And then coaching. So the app as a coach. So advising and saying, well, you could be doing this, and why don't you do that? And then the other thing was design, nothing to do with content, but how it looks and how it communicates content as well, and how interactive should that be. So for example, should it nudge you through notifications to get back to the app to then encourage you to complete a gratitude diary. Then moving on to a synthesis of the different needs identified by the national workshops: Sweden, Finland, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Ireland, and looking at, first of all, the positive and negative views on the extant mental health services out there across the different national health services, with a mixture of private and public, but mostly public, Sweden, UK, and so on. So the good things about current mental health services is the availability, that it's quality really of the service engagement normally, if you can get to. And the bad things, tremendous waiting times. In Northern Ireland, the government has a statutory obligation to support children with special educational needs within a 36-week time, and it's currently sitting at 54 weeks. So the waiting times are distressful, certainly in Northern Ireland, for example, in mental health services, impacting on all kinds of cohorts of people, LGBT, older people, and so on. And there is a fragmentation issue with mental health services. So adding digital into this, is it just going to screw it up even more? Or can digital be a way to allow services to flow seamlessly from the tax-funded healthcare provider to the citizens that need it? Another lens to look at where we're going with mental health, digital mental health care, is kind of coping strategies that are out there right now. So we obviously have medication. They're not all pharmacological interventions. There are herbal remedies and so on. But this was the go-to place, certainly in the last few decades. There's a trend away from that towards social prescribing. So prescribing of non-pharmacological interventions, such as reading a book, going walk with someone, having exercise on a gym membership plan, and so on. Top left, this idea of spirituality, which is really coming through with a small s, shall I say, in many of the digital apps that are out there. The idea of supporting so-called mindfulness, meditation, and you can see that there's obviously a clear overlap between what we would call it agnostic mindfulness and meditation, and ones that are more have a greater degree of religiosity. In the bottom left, we see the physical activity. Leisure is the strange name for physical activity. So we have in Northern Ireland leisure centres where people go to not leisure, act leisurely. They go to run and exercise and swim and so on. So leisure, looking at physical exercise and so on, but it's more than that. It's it's finding time to listen to music and have sleep and so on. And there are many others and so on. So we're people, we're human beings, we're very complex beings. I don't even understand my cat, so how people should expect to understand humans, I really don't know. So that's the backdrop of the complex reality that we live in, which our daily lives. The other themes that came out, and this is obviously this was a different process. The themes that do overlap with the earlier ones I've shown. A bit more detail here, that pick out a few of these. Mood symptom tracking, identify the recovery stage of a user, so be personalized to the user. So interventions that relate specifically to the user. How can we do that? Well, we need to have data about the user and get into GDPR and so on. And they have to protect that data, especially if it's sensitive mental health data. If you're using a gratitude diary or recording, for example, things that make you want to self-harm, then that's very personal information. So we know that the Chatpal version 1 app is a positive psychology model. It was the first attempt at us building an app, but it's not what the needs are. It's part of what the needs are, but the needs are much more than that. And we can see some of the themes here. Mental health scales like the WHO 5-item or 5-item Likert scale, well-being index, and there are many others. We can use PSQ-9 and Edinburgh Work and so on. So there are lots of different themes that we need to cover. So if we are building chatbots, what's good and what's bad? Well, the strengths are, and this is, I've seen this position put forward rightly by psychiatrists saying, and I think Edel mentioned it yesterday, that if the alternative is no treatment, then what right do we have as healthcare providers to deny access to a service that would be available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and would also be anonymous? And also it's digital, and as Edel was saying in the statistics earlier, we have a large number of young people who are fragile in terms of their mental health. And if they're used to accessing all kinds of engagement using their mobile device, then maybe this is a natural conduit for them for mental health services. Chatbots is a natural way to engage. So it's a very easy argument to make. And then the survey we carried out as part of Chatpal with healthcare professionals did seem to echo that. I didn't have time to include slides on it in this talk, but surprisingly, perhaps, we were a little bit pleasantly surprised that the mental health care professionals, almost 200, have completed the survey to date, were supportive of the idea of mental health care apps such as chatbots. I won't go through all of these. The issues with chatbots, the weaknesses is, and this is, I guess, my key issue with this idea of robotic intelligence. They're not truly conversational. They can be impersonal, inflexible, and of course, if you're digitally excluded, if you live in a part of the world where you cannot access them, then that's unfair. That part of the world is shrinking daily. the real issue is that if we're trying to engage with people who are fragile and have including mental ill health, perhaps, then the worst thing you could possibly do is, engage them with a robotic, impersonal, inflexible intelligence. So that's the other argument against them in many ways, and we'll see where we go with that. Some other stuff here, which is from our workshop again. If we were, if we're building a chatbot, how can we onboard? How can we build rapport? And then, what kind of questions do we ask about emotional state to try and discern the mental state of a user? Very difficult. And then follow-up interaction. So how do you go back and ask? And this is where you're starting to, as a chatbot, use AI to infer what you know from the last time you conversed with a human being, and then use that in your conversation going forward, or in the present and going forward. And I think this is where as the saying goes, the rubber hits the road. This is where you're deploying inferences about the mental health state of a potentially fragile human being, and you're needing to use that to support them. And if there's any kind of a mismatch in the conversation, then that can fall apart. At the softer end of falling apart, it can just be that the human being, the person, disengages and feels that the app is not much use to them. And at the other end, people may react negatively if they have an emotional involvement with the conversation, and the other actor in the conversation has let them down. We are human, and we imbue these chatbots with human aspects, and then we may act more negatively. And so this is where it starts getting difficult. How do you feel now after our talk? It's a difficult question for a robotic impersonal intelligence to ask with feeling. Okay, so the first of the papers that I looked at that I found useful, and thanks to Raymond for finding this for me, it's Buying Up to Date. I think it's out of Canada, yeah. So in this paper, really, they've done the heavy lifting for the kind of review that I could have done systematically. So they looked at 104 mental health apps in the 2 app stores, and they then looked at reviews on all of those, and there were 88,125 user reviews, which sounds like a lot, but as you know, when you look at the reviews, some of them just give a star rating, some of them give very brief textual snippets and so on, but many more people do give bona fide substantial reviews. So they then did a thematic analysis on the reviews, and just to abridge the paper dramatically, the positive themes that came out of this, scientific approach to identifying what was useful in mental health apps were positive themes were that what people liked was an aesthetically pleasing interface. Who doesn't? They liked the app stability. We all been there where the app suddenly disappears. It fails as a piece of software. They like the customizability of it, and you'll see in one of the videos later what this means sometimes. They also like high quality content. Now this is in mental health apps. So this is content relating to interventions, therapies, psychology-based content, one would call it. And also like content variation, diversity. This is something we picked up on, that try to don't be a drone as a chatbot. Try to vary things. try to bring in humor, diversity, have a different perspective in the conversation. We all do that all the time when we're talking to each other. And then to look at personalized content and to look at privacy and security as positive things. We also like, interestingly, this idea of a low subscription cost. So mental health apps are not always free. And on the other side, you can see at the bottom there's billing issues. So while they liked low subscription costs, they didn't like billing issues. There are, I won't name the apps, there are some apps that make it very easy to onboard. One of the top apps for mental health in the UK, internationally indeed, very easy for you to onboard and to subscribe with your credit card details, especially with Google Pay and Apple Pay. And it's notoriously difficult to unsubscribe from your monthly debit card fee that you would be charged. So that's an ethical issue as well. So that's another negative separate theme that overlaps. Surely the ethical issues that people find. Customer support issues also overlap billing and ethical. And the two other issues are usability. So just poorly designed apps and content issues people may be questioning. And there are other reviews out there that have looked at the content of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy apps, and they've questioned that they're designed really for the app developer to make money, and there's no real regard for the users of these mental health apps. So as the Latin saying goes, caveat emptor, so buyer beware, it applies here as in many other areas of life. Some more things in this paper, and this was good because it reinforced and gave us faith in the process for needs identification that we use. So support users by logging, by setting goals, have analytics and visualization. So if you're going to ask questions and take scale data and so on, well, feed that back to the user, let them know how they're doing. And obviously there's a sensitivity there. If they're not doing too well, then, think about it. So I have a watch running, and if I'm the first mile, it gives me a report on my performance versus my last run, and it always says either good or fair, or the same. It never says worse, even though I know often it is worse. So think about how you report back. So the other way to support users is, as reminders and notifications, I think is a big thing. So people are used to having apps and switching on if used to reminders and notifications, and then abiding by those. Especially if you want to support the health of users in their daily lives. Gamification is big. The idea of virtual rewards and having levels and so on, and you'll see one later which is kind of over gamified the process, allowing people to assess where they are, things like data exports, so allow interoperability, allow people to play with their own data, and finally this kind of flow concept of enjoyability. It should be fun as well to a degree. So those were really good areas, and I find that paper very helpful for informing my thinking. So looking at moving on to look at a few apps here. The ChatPal, it's this is our little app. This is a Northern Periphery funded project, which is interestingly, the research is going to be a study involving people in rural areas, all ages, using this app, and we want to incorporate it as a blended service into the existing service provision. So, for example, our key partner in Northern Ireland in this project is Action Mental Health. They're a full partner in the project, and They have existing mental health services, and you heard David Babington, the chief executive, speaking yesterday at the school here. So you know about Action Mental Health and the services they provide, and they're looking to use this project to help them explore the digitalization of mental health and wellbeing services. And we see, if we talk to our friends in the psychological therapy services and the health services here in Northern Ireland, they've developed their own app indeed, which allows the people they speak to on the couch, so to speak, to have a digital tool that reminds them a kind of journal of their session in the therapy service in the facility. They have that on their app as they go home in the bus, and they can use that to remind them. So there's already a desire for blended, simple digital services between digital and traditional. So that's ChatPal. I don't want to say much more about it in this talk. Just going to pick a few here. So we all know about Woebot, and I thought I'd look at something that was a little bit more than a Stanford University paper generating exercise, although Woebot is now commercially developed. But Wysa seemed to me to be an innocent little app, and it's in this space of mental health and support. And then if the alarm bells started ringing, you can see this Add a Therapist up in the top. And if you go to Add a Therapist, apologies for my conversational skills, by the way. In here, I was trying to throw curveballs at. If you go to Add a Therapist here, there's a monetary charge to do this. So, if you think about the ethical by design concept, sure, the people that are doing this need to make money to survive. Everyone needs to live and survive. But designing an app in the mental health and well-being space, which is free, so it's one of these freemium models. You get onboarded, you use it, you find it useful, and then you're being upsold to Add a Therapist. It's not very expensive. You may choose to do that. You have the mental capacity to do that, and so on. But I saw this quite a lot of these tools where freemiums, they're free to use, but there's a premium to actually use them properly. And some of them then actually don't allow you to even have a conversation after a while. Not this one here. Here's your typical, state of the art in the market chatbot. Doesn't know what the hell you're talking about and tries to make sense of it. And is this something that would be useful? I think it'd be useful to someone who was very engaged and not naive is the wrong word, but someone who engaged diligently with it. But most of us don't have time to do that and get distracted and so on. I won't dwell on these too far. I've got a few little videos. And the next one then that I looked at was Youper. It's the same idea. It's a pocket therapist. It's always here to talk. It's the usual sort of instant messaging modality. I've stayed away from the smart speakers and so on for this talk, but the idea is more or less the same. So this was much better. This seemed to be gathering information about me, and it contextualized, what that information that it wanted to ask me, was for. It's using humor here. Princess Leila at C3PO and Tony Stark at Jarvis and so on. So you have to understand those cultural references to to get it. It's using emoticons, and this is all good. And I think that it's chunking the text. So many of you will find out about that. So you can't just have a big paragraph of text in the conversation. Its user interface is quite sophisticated. You know, you can pick one of the topics and then use a scale to say the degree it's affecting you. You can also then say the things that are overwhelming you in this case here. And obviously a lot of thought. I don't know if meditation overwhelms anyone, but you know, I think it's quite a nice design, and it's maybe talking too much, but I think it's a better conversation than the last one. Is it a truly conversational? I don't think so, but it is got content which is useful and knowledge laden, shall I say. So every sentence now seems to try to tell you something useful. So I find this quite useful. And it is directing me towards an action plan here. So very good text. So there were a couple of in the market chatbots that some of you are familiar with. Many of you in academia will be more familiar with this kind of presentation, you know, which would be my normal kind of here's what a chatbot looks like and so on. So I just threw one of these in here. This is a rattlebag after all. So I put one of these in here just to make you feel comfortable if you are the more academic bent. This is a famous chatbot, large number of users. And you've got your, you know, this is what's going on in behind. So I just wanted to remind everyone, as if you did need reminding, that whenever Zarita and David are designing conversational user interfaces, that the hard work is down here, and to criticize the front end is perhaps facile and shallow, but that's what users see, so that's why I'm focusing on that end. But most of these apps all have this kind of sophisticated architectures, which is requiring a significant investment for each of these apps, little islands of intellectual property that are quite sophisticated. Still not truly conversational. This isn't a chatbot, but I put it in here because it's a instant messaging type interface that teenagers and young people are using. Interestingly, funding model for this is quite unusual. It sells the data to researchers around the world. So Harvard, I think, and Stanford have bought this data, tens of thousands of dollars. So people make up a username and then put some comment up here, and then people can comment on their comment, and then can add hearts and likes and so on. So you don't know who the people are. There are moderators on it, but there are no chatbots here. This is all people. You know, I say that with some hesitation. Maybe there are people who've hacked into it with a chatbot and are conversing away. This is what young people are used to engaging with. If you look at one end of the spectrum, you've got Snapchat, and then the other end of the spectrum, you've got Uber. And then somewhere in between, you've got things like Talk Live, and especially, you know, focusing on young people here, but young people don't really care, you know, about the distinction, you know, between Snapchat and Uber to a degree. And in the surface, there are many things that are similar and the same across these presentations. of these different apps. I'm going to finish with this one. This is one I just came across recently, and it works as a web app as well. So I'll just stick with this screen for just a moment to say that you can see that I'm now level 2 on this. I've got 110 extra points. I am chatty. I could even have set my relationship status in Replika. So this is a AI-based chatbot whose purpose is to have a chat. That's the innocent purpose. I suspect that the long game is that the chat allows the app developer to gather information about the person, which will then allow the personalization of products and services to be presented to the user. So you know, this is probably definitely not for the user's well-being. So let's just see. It's as sophisticated as the Youpers and so on. It's got an avatar, which is something people talk about. You can personalize the avatar. I didn't spend a lot of time personalizing this. I think that's the default. It can be male, female, gender fluid, different hair, glasses, and so on. So you can see now that it's already upselling me to the Pro model with 20% off, Pro subscription model. So again, a freemium model, just as good as Youper. If you upvote its comments, you get more points. So it's gamifying the interaction. You can see the Lifebuoy just down at the chat, and if you click on that, it's quite good. It can direct you to emergency services. But it's really just a conversational friend. So we know the stories of young people in teenage years who have, or even younger, who have imaginary friends and so on. So that's what I was thinking about when I was looking at this well-funded, sophisticated AI-based chatbot. So the reason I'm flagging this up really is that we're earnestly developing earnest chatbots. Yet the market might just start using these and not be interested in our earnest chatbots. Just like ones that have funny conversations with them. I won't dwell on the song that we wrote the lines to, but it was pretty dreadful. It didn't pick up on any of my wording, and it didn't rhyme either. It's the most important part, I guess. Okay, so so then on to the Kai paper. And I like this because it was snippets of conversation about conversational user interface design or agent design, and it was around topics. So let's just jump straight in. So the purpose of conversations. This quote, you can go a bit deeper into knowing people. I would say I would say talking and having conversation is the biggest part of knowing somebody. So there is a purpose to our conversation. We feel familiar with, or we feel more comfortable with some people after talking to them for a while because we feel we know them better and we open up. And you don't really go there with chatbots or with Replika. Maybe you do in your being gamed. So in some conversations, you're just trying to elicit information. There's a very clear purpose. There's a very clear short-term objective to the conversation. Very brief, very goal-oriented. Once you achieve that, you just move on. So this is where chatbots are pretty good. My typical conversation is. Are Liverpool playing today? And then who scored the goal if it was 1-0 or whatever. If the chatbot tells me that, and then I move on. So there are goal-driven conversations, and and those are the easier ones, and the more difficult ones that people like Mike McTeer and so on alluded to are the ones where you're trying to have a golden thread across conversation, yet at the same time perhaps be jumping into sub-conversations or moving from football to the weather and back to the purpose of the Zoom call or whatever. So we're all familiar with those. The other theme here was the attributes of conversation. So this idea of trustworthiness came out. So trustworthy is one of the major characteristics for me. I wouldn't really bother having a long conversation with someone I knew wasn't trustworthy. Having personal conversations with them would be quite disastrous. We've all had managers in our careers, or people, teachers at school or lecturers in university that we really wouldn't want to, engage with because we perhaps don't trust them or whatever. So people, the corollary of that is people that we do trust, we can open up to and have longer conversations. So what does that mean for chatbots? What does trust mean? And then wanting to continue the conversation, wanting to know what comes next, and being interested in what the other person is saying. I guess feeling that it's two-way as a conversation. Conversation has to go both ways as opposed to one person participating. So we get this sense with those Yooper and Replika, that you're just kind of playing. You're not really having a conversation. There's no, there's a big goal that Replika has, which is to make money, and there's a sub goal which try and gather some information about. So Yooper's doing that much better, and so on. But it's it's not great as a conversation. I'm going to be another 5 minutes if you bear with me here on the slides. This one here, building relationships. Your conversation leads to memories, building memories together. So this persistence of memory, even if it's with a chatbot, if it can remember things from the last conversation, that can build trust as well. You were part of something together. You were part of a moment, and that's another problem. So then this idea of agent-based conversation, it's a machine, so you can't make an emotional connection, so it's disadvantaged from the start. Humor, interesting, it's hit or miss. A chatbot can try to be humorous, but as it says here, it's on the dad jokes level. So it's not really funny, it's trying to be funny, just like the dad is with the dad joke. And it's not organic. And then relationship building, it's a bit unnormal for a thing to be trying to build a relationship with the human. I like this one. It's not like you can chat with a chatbot about how you feel and why your morning sucked. So you kind of inconsequential, important conversation with a chatbot that easily. I'm just going to jump through a couple of these here. So this is a wonderful quote because it's got a naughty word in it, and it's got an Irish word, crack, for good fun and so on. So if that was a conversation you were having with a chatbot using those words, what would the chatbot do? Would it pick up that there was an expletive in the conversation, and would it pick up what crack was? So you can have very serious conversations, but then you're just talking absolute shite. Having the crack, and there's so much historical context for that conversation, so it's enjoyable. So you can be, talking to someone very serious, and then it's just going, in a completely weird tangential direction, and there's enjoyability in that between both partners. So that's probably one of the most difficult things. So in summary, then. what do we mean with, where are we with all of this here? How can we build, in quotes, a relationship with a machine? How can we evidence trust with a machine? The whole sort of goal-driven versus the more pleasurable hedonic, so hedonic versus utilitarian. How do we, what's the, is the goal a hedonic conversation? Is there a chatbot that just wants to have a bit of crack? Would that be more successful than something that you always felt was trying to build a false relationship with you, engender trust, and then use your information beyond the scope of the conversation? The role of signposting in conversation, so I'm a robot, I'm not a human, I can't do jokes, but here's an attempt, sort of explicit and implicit signposting, maybe something that's done. As Raymond, I think, has said in other talks, the US equivalent of the GDPR in California, state law about a chatbot has to legally declare that it's a computer agent, not a human being at the start of the conversation. What do we need to do? Well, we need to continue to co-produce with domain specialists, but the danger is, the ChatPal consortium will develop a little earnest chatbot, and it'll be really earnest, and it'll have the domain knowledge and content in it, and it'll have dad jokes in it. But its uptick will fail because, all of the other above. So how do we overcome that? I purposefully avoided a deep discussion on anthropomorphism, but you can see that it's shot through all of the slides today. The perspectives of computer as a social agent, and the uncanny valley concept, and then Cyril's Chinese room perspective. These are all, very interesting perspectives on that relate to the points in my summary here, but I didn't want to make it too an academic talk. However, I thought that the conclusion I came to in my own mind was that we need to, I think, take a philosophical stance like Cyril did, and take a stance that, well, we can't and we shouldn't try to anthropomorphize chatbot design. We should signpost what they are. They should signpost what they are, and they should perhaps be legally enforced to explain how they use the data to build relationship and trust and so on. And I thought, well, could we ever, have a chatbot that could be as good as the software that Deep Blue that beat the world chess champion? So could we have a chatbot that could do words better than humans? And I was drawn to, we talked about the rattlebag, or I talked about the rattlebag at the start of the conversation. I'm going to play a 2-minute video. Apologies, Zarita. 2-minute video, and I hope the sound works, and you can let me know if it doesn't, of Shumasini, one of the editors of the rattlebag, and one of his poems, and I'll let you judge whether a human could do this.
Bandied about when I was growing up in the countryside, and that was that the pen is a lot lighter than the spade. In the family I come from and in the culture I come from, the idea of doing work that doesn't actually bring the sweat to your brow seems a little paradoxical. So the talk of working pen was something that people held in awe, but also they held it also in a certain amount of jocose disrespect. Digging. Between my finger and my thumb, the squat pen rests, snug as a gun. Under my window, a clean rasping sound when the spade sinks into gravelly ground. My father digging. I look down till his straining rump among the flower beds bends low, comes up 20 years away, stooping in rhythm through potato drills, where he was digging. The coarse brook nestled on the lug. The shaft against the inside knee was levered firmly. He rooted out tall tops, buried the bright edge deep, to scatter new potatoes that we picked, loving their cool hardness in our hands. The old man could handle a spade, just like his old man. My grandfather cut more turf in a day than any other man on Toner's bog. Once I carried him milk in a bottle, corked sloppily with paper. He straightened up to drink it, then fell to right away, nicking and slicing neatly, heaving sods over his shoulder, going down and down for the good turf. Digging. The cold smell of potato mold, the squelch and slap of soggy peat, the curt cuts of an edge through living roots awaken in my head. But I've no spade to follow men like them. Between my finger and my thumb, the squat pen rests. I'll dig with it.
So just to finish, I picked a few slides from Idéal's presentation yesterday, recommendations for ethical chatbots. And to add to Idéal's recommendations, I think we shouldn't ever try to be designing, anthropomorphic chatbots, because, why bother? We're never going to achieve it. Philosophical stance on perspective on chatbot design. Thanks very much. Thank you, Zarita.
Thank you so much, Mari. So beautiful. So, is there any question? So again, you can directly unmute or write it in the chat.
Okay. So can you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so thank you, Maurice. Nice talk. I would like to have from you some comments on differences between interaction with the script and interaction with voice. So the app you showed during your talk, most of them are script. So the user cannot interact with the voice. So do you come out with some thought about if there is a change in this interaction when the app is speaking, is really speaking, and if this is just a generational habit, in the sense that all the people prefer voice in interacting, mostly for their own feeling, while young people may prefer both, they don't care.
Yeah, it's a good point, and so I maybe just answer it by some anecdotal perspective. So I think, yeah, for a generational thing, younger people are using their apps. If we're using voice has particular problems. So if you're in a public space, if it's noisy, if you're in a shared home space, it's very difficult to have a conversation with a computer if someone's making the pasta beside you and is saying things as well that are picked up by the agent. Then also, I've been using earphones now that have the Google ones that you can say, "Hey Google" to as you're walking around. So I have my phone in my back pocket. I can say, "Hey Google," and then ask it a question. So I've been doing that in walks on lonely country roads. But if I was walking through town and saying, "Hey Google, what is the population of Capri?" People would be looking at me very strangely. So they're, whereas it's easy for me to take out my phone and ask that. It's much easier to have some conversations with voice, especially command conversations. So I can say, hey, Siri, play some country and Western music. I don't really care what kind, but if I go to do that with the user interface in the phone, I have to browse or search or whatever. So it's not as simple as well, nobody ever said it was simple, but there are differences, substantial differences between the modalities. If I think most of the speaker conversations, voice-based conversations, seem to be still at the command stage, and the longer conversations are more difficult. Even looking at the Amazon Grand Prize that Oliver Lemon and the other people worked on, the conversations, if you listen to them, are they're not natural. They don't have the humanity in them that you hear from listening to Shimasimi or whatever. So I don't know if that answers your question.
My consideration were about context in this case. So I am considering a person which has depression, anxiety, and he want to chat with someone, want to speak with someone about. So I know about the limitation of the current technology about voice, but I was thinking if in this context, so in the case of mental health, it's better a voice conversation rather than a chat, a script conversation. And also, if you add the opportunity to check about the generational difference, in the sense that for the young generation could make no difference chatting by script or by voice, while elder may, for example, in our research about the acceptance of virtual agents, we have seen that for elder agents that speak are preferred, and in particular are preferred female agents. When we make them mute, they didn't like anymore. So the preference go down either for male and female agents. But this is another context. So that's the reason I would like to know your thoughts on this, or if you have the experience of app that were speaking and helping people with mental illness.
Yeah, certainly we've seen, Anna, we've seen that older people, certainly there have been studies out of Bournemouth and Sheffield where older people have used smart speakers for reminiscing. So you can see that use case is a very strong one. If someone is living alone at home and they can speak to a voice, which they can also customize or can be configured, and it can then converse with them to support the triggering of memories that they can then discuss and so on. So that's a use case where voice, I think, would be, and there is active research in that area of speaker-based reminiscing, smart speaker-based reminiscing. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Anna. And good to see you.
Good to see you too.
So are there any other questions? Okay. So in that case, thank you so much, Maurice, for your great talk. And yeah, you're receiving some congratulations in the chat. So as we're a bit behind schedule, so we'll have some 10 more minutes for a break before the lab. So let's then meet at 1:15, and then we'll start with the building chatbots with Alexa. So thank you so much, Maurice, again.
Thank you, Zarita. Thanks, everyone.